Here over at SubStars right now over at Odyssey. So, Black Samurai in Assassin's Creed. The way it started is the guy who wrote this article, this is from 2 months ago, was bootstrapping his own articles to edit the Wikipedia, which I guess can be edited anonymously. And in his earlier work, he was speculating about this samurai, whether he was a samurai or not. And then later on, he said it was definite. And so what I'm guessing is that the whole thing kind of sounds like nonsense. So he could sell a book and probably become a consultant on a game. So whenever there's money involved, you want to look into that. So the game is set in 1579, and it's called the Warring Period. Seems like kind of wasn't most of history the Warring Period? I mean, anything that's not a Warring Period is really not worth taking note of. So the game is set in Japan, where the characters got to sneak around Japan without being noticed, ninjas and whatnot. So naturally, you'd make the character fit in and be invisible by being not Japanese 500 years ago. The thing is, whether the truth of the story, like maybe he was, that's entirely possible. Maybe the story, maybe what they're saying about him is entirely possible. It's just the odds are so far against it that there's only so much willing suspension of disbelief you can go through, and that's if he was, like, if you had hard evidence that this was real, okay, you'd probably be onto something, and you'd probably be onto a very cool story. But there's just not, the evidence is just so thin. They're not going to suddenly come up with more evidence 500 years later. He was just most likely he was just a retainer. And thing is, people just want to play it. They want to play this game. They want to play as a Japanese character in Japan. And the other option is, well, you can play as a Japanese female ninja. It's like, all right, it's better than nothing, but the male characters, what most characters are going to identify, most of the male players are going to identify with. Can they just get a male Japanese character? Apparently not. You get this character. Thing is, we don't want every single moment to be spent in this endless gay communist culture war. And I say gay communism because the half Japanese girl who lives in California, who works for Sweet Baby Incorporated, if you remember them, and says that the Japanese in Japan love the ethnic replacement. Keep in mind, this is a Japanese article. Even though there was a Japanese political group that was complaining, as well as there are other Japanese groups who are mentioned in it. And she, of course, is a gay communist. So anyway, with all this stuff, your final vote is with your wallet, and people are saying that the game is going to sell well no matter what, which is kind of disappointing. It's just based on the power of the name. So I have no idea if people are that desperate for video games that they'll just jump into it no matter what. But the fact that they're trying to carefully manage the narrative, because they do have the failure of Concord and Dustborn looming over their shoulder. One of those was it had like one player. I think maybe it was Dustborn. They had one player playing live on Steam. So the thing is, so it's conceivable that if enough people talk about how ridiculous it is, they'll lose some sales when it comes out in November. People just want a little bit of escapism. They want to feel immersed in the Japanese story, and you want some guy that looks like this. What a great outfit that is. We should bring that stuff back. And not something. The thing is, with all this stuff, it's not in a vacuum, and that's what the left seems to be purposely disingenuous about. They think that, like, we come to everything fresh with a fresh, open mind approach. It's like, no, we've been around. We've been witness to this. I guess Trump's derangement syndrome started in 2016. Seemed to kick everyone into gear. We've been witness to it for like 10 years. We know that this is you being woke, and that's the perception of it. So, it would be awesome if the game undersold. So, you'll find out in 2 months. And people are aware that the games, the movies, the comics, all this kind of stuff, wherever there's a possibility to shoehorn in some woke cancer, they will. At least people are finally talking about it, and we're seeing that some of the movies and the video games are losing money. So in That Park Place, John Trent wrote an article where he talks about the hit piece wrote by the New York Times. And, this is the thing that the left wing they think they're raging against the machine, as I always say, but they really seem to believe that. And then you look at all the institutional support they have, all the puff piece articles, and it's bizarre how easy, how many softball questions they get from the mainstream, where you can have an article in the New York Times to try to essentially be like, isn't this just an advertisement for a video game? Why, yes, it is, but they're doing it because it's also part of the culture war. So the hit piece, New York Times, connected with the collaboration with Ubisoft, and the outlet's Zachary Small cited the Japanese consultant and translator who claimed the criticism of the game was being done by individuals in the West using translators, and that the Japanese people were not upset about how the game only features Yasuke as a protagonist, but that he's depicted, as a samurai. So this half Japanese person who lives in California, I guess, Hashimoto, told the New York Times it was people in the West who were upset with seeing Yasuke as a samurai. Small added that Hashimoto explained that many of the negative online comments written in Japan appear to have been roughly translated from English. So it's just all the evil chuds who are, it's not. I mean, this is literally a Japanese magazine. And the narrative they were trying to spin was ridiculous to begin with, given that Small had written just 2 paragraphs ahead of his citation of Hashimoto that Ubisoft's attempt to assuage concerns about the game's authenticity, apologizing in a lengthy statement for promotional materials that it said had bothered some Japanese audiences. Because, I mean, it's like they just... How hard is it to just put a Japanese character in a Japanese game? So even before this, Small noted the inclusion of the Black Samurai was the primary complaint, but observers also pointed to the presence of Chinese architecture in Japan and period inappropriate flags. I mean, it feels like they're doing a lot of cut and paste for game elements and whatnot. The controversy became so heated that a small right-wing political party in Japan formally asked the government to comment on what it considered historical inaccuracies. And, the longer you go into this, you realize, yeah, it is a game. It is a game. It doesn't have to be perfect. Nobody's saying... But the problem now is people watch movies, and there's been a study about this. Movies and video games are turning into movies, and the more TV and videos that people watch, the less they're able to discern between reality, because it's movies and TV are implanting false memories in people's minds. So they grow up with this perception, and in the back of their mind they're thinking, oh, well, yeah, I know it's TV, but they're not going to be that far out. And then you look at the reality of it as an adult, you go, oh, it has nothing to do with reality. And, if you're of this generation growing up watching TV, and then you become an adult and you look at what American TV has done, you realize, oh, it was just done by people in Hollywood, movies about the South or TV shows about the South, and you realize they had never set foot. It's all flyover country to them. They'd never set foot outside of Hollywood, so they could just use every bad guy was some small town sheriff. It was just bizarre nonsense from these coastal elite parasites. Anyway, so Japanese political party requests an investigation, and why did Ubisoft issue an apology to Japanese gamers? And the other thing they've got is, so you got this Yasuku character. He's not Japanese, and he's going around doing horrific violence to Japanese characters in the game. Kind of weird optics. Anyway, so the Hashimoto was an employee of Sweet Baby Incorporated from 2020 to 2023, as noted by his own LinkedIn profile. And Sweet Baby is like Black Girl Gamers and that other... Oh, Anita Sarkeesian's in the news lately because she wants to get back on the horse, and she has a consulting company. I don't know where she's been for the past 5 years, or a couple of years after Feminist Frequency went out of business, the YouTube channel. All they had to do was let that thing run, and they had they turned the comments off and they turned the downvotes off back before YouTube did it for you. And if they allowed comments, people would go on there and argue, but they just couldn't have anyone tear their narrative apart. And then as Feminist Frequency went on, that got weirder and weirder. They got some guy on there who's teaching the women about feminism, and it's some 300-pound balding guy. The whole thing was very weird. Anyway, they shut that down. I would have left that up and just your guaranteed income if people are fighting in the comments. Where's I going with this? So she's looking for some new grift, so she's going back to consulting. But the thing is, it feels like they kind of replaced her with all these new younger companies. She also threw a wedding for herself in Sweden or something a couple years ago to celebrate her 41st birthday. She got married to herself. It's probably the saddest, most pathetic thing I've ever heard of. It's not just you can just have a birthday party. You don't dress up like a bride at a slightly chubby 41 years old to celebrate that you never got married or had kids. That's like something someone but I was going to say it's like suicidal to do something like that, but it's really narcissism levels are so off the chart that she had a wedding based birthday party. That's fucking bizarre. Anyway, so this guy works for Sweet Baby, and he's an active journalist whose articles are at Polygon and all the other, Kotaku, IGN kind of garbage magazines. And he actually mentions a couple I never heard of. Siliconera? Them? I've never heard of these. I guess they're video game things. But the weird thing is that those outlets are owned by the one group called Gamers Group, which... See, that's the other thing where if you think a lot of these digital websites, like digital magazines, I don't know what you call these they're magazines, are, okay, what was that old comic magazine? That was cool. I can't remember the name of it. I think they finally went out of business back in the days when, conventions and comics were a thing. The thing is, these are not organic. Like I was talking about Bounty into Comics itself. Like it started off as John Trent with a couple of people working with him, and he sold it off to some big corporation who's running it now. And it's you got to be very suspect of these corporations, because what the controlled ops like to do is they like to own the left and the right. It's why you see the Matt Walshes and the Ben Shapiros put out a very careful right-wing message to prevent people from going too right-wing. But it's like the thing with the Mary Sue. It's not just one of those girls got together and started a company. It's run by some massive globalist parasitical media company. I will say, the game graphics look cool. Everything looks cool, but it's just like you just don't have to. Everything doesn't have to be a battle in the culture war, and they look at you like you're crazy when you say that. Anyway, so the gay communist who's Californian, he looks mixed. He doesn't even look half Japanese, but he's writing on his articles, and he's talking about like the colonialism of Japan's history of colonial rule, which is like, yeah, for sure they were absolute monsters in World War II to the Chinese, to the Koreans, and the prisoners of war. Everyone read the Rape of Nanking and whatnot. But like, do you need that in every little like Animal Crossing or something? It just kind of feels like it kind of feels like all this is just people are just getting so fed up with it. And then there's that other thing where who's that video game CEO allegedly wrote a comment on a YouTube video talking about how games, he didn't say woke, but he said something about how games narratives are getting a little too preachy or something, and then they asked him about that, and he didn't answer, but he was on his LinkedIn, and he said it sounds like a very sharp, perceptive person who answered that question. It's like he was saying he just wanted to make games without all this preachiness, and then these left-wing soy boys on Twitter lose their mind because they go, listen, everything's political. It's like, okay, well, why don't you have some balance and have some right-of-center viewpoints? And they go, but those are the Nazis. We can't have that. Well, how are these games selling? Well, they're not selling as well as they used to, because obese POC space lesbians in Concord and Dustborn are just... Nobody wants to spend money or time to play all that kind of crap. Or, Rings of Power. How well is Rings? It's an absolute failure. And they're probably going to keep that going just because they don't want to admit failure. Or all these other movies. I keep mentioning the same, dozen movies over the past few years. It's like they all massively fail, and they're all girl power and diverse and all kind of nonsense. It's like, wow, they're losing money hand over fist. Yeah, we're going to double down on it. It's It's all so tiresome. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. See you guys on the next episode.